Alright, so obviously this one's a little late because I wanted to make sure I could squeeze as many award contenders into one video as much as possible. And I knew that I was going to be a bit late on 3 Billboards, but I did finally find it. So, these are the 4 we're going to look at that. Obviously 2 of them are certainly contenders. The other 2, like I said, maybe Wonder's got a shot at adapted screenplay, we'll see. And we'll see if Gyllenhaal gets any farther than Critics' Choice or whatever. But, so yeah, let's go into these. Not just because they're contenders, but just as quality in general, they were fairly highly anticipated. So we're going to start with 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, though, which is obviously the third feature-length movie from Martin McDonagh, I think, following In Bruges and Seven Psychopaths. Obviously, I did a video on both of those, and In Bruges is a personal favorite, and I like Seven Psychopaths a lot. I liked it even more the second and third time I saw it. And so I was obviously very much looking forward to this, even if it seemed like it wasn't going to be... I really wasn't quite sure what to expect, because you kind of immediately, you see McDonagh's other 2 movies. I know some people didn't care for Seven Psychopaths, certainly not as much as they cared for In Bruges, though it still obviously has a fan base, but it was the idea of... You would think if somebody loved both those movies, they would just be immediately on board with this. And for the most part I was, especially with him, given the cast and all that. But then when I read the plot, I wasn't sure what I was feeling, because I was concerned about tones, which I really shouldn't be, because obviously Seven Psychopaths and In Bruges especially have this way of taking... Like, In Bruges is hilarious, but then it's also, like, one of the most tragic movies of probably that last decade. So McDonagh really has this handle on exactly when to put what kind of tone where, without it feel like they're nice and seamless when they seem like they should be all over the place. And I guess there are some people who don't think he meshes them well, and that's where their criticisms come from with him, but obviously this has gotten overwhelming praise, and it's one of those cases to where it was I felt stupid and I felt corrected, because as soon as I was watching it was like, yeah, I'm not really sure where my doubts were coming from. Of course he could pull this off. Because the plot scene, I mean, once again, I don't know where I was coming from with this, because we all know how fucking serious and dark and depressing In Bruges got, despite being as funny as it is. But when I just read the story, it was kind of like, how do you... This sounds so serious. It's like, how do you add McDonagh's sense of humor to this? But of course, we'll go starting with the opening in general. When we see her drive by the billboards and kind of get the idea, and there's this whole intro that's just kind of silent. To where we get to Baskin Carter Burwell a little bit, and we kind of see in silence where her motivations come from and all that, and we kind of get to piece it together ourselves in that first 10 minutes or so, especially with the backwards way the billboards are revealed, which is genius. And the way they play with Rockwell's character too, where we get hints of what he is, but we're not quite totally sure of that until we just keep following him. But what I liked about this opening in particular was the fact that the way they didn't use words, and the fact that it was silent for a while. And then when she decides that she's gonna pay for the billboard, she goes to see Caleb Landry Jones, and when she walks into his office, it's like that silence has been building to when the dialogue is just going to burst in and then be nonstop from there. And it's like we have just enough time to bask in that silence at the beginning, that when she walks in and just starts talking and they do the back and forth, we totally get that we're in that McDonagh dialogue now. Just that silence just really makes it burst right into that moment suddenly, like right into your face, more or less, but in a really nice, effective way. So I like that they were able to kind of build that, and that's also a sign immediately showing you that how he's able to pull off both of those. Like in the first 2 minutes, he says, oh look, we can do this kind of silent contemplative thing really well, and then we can also do the really heavy dialogue, you know, back and forth, a lot of times comedic, just all at once, one right after the other, and we can go back and forth without there being too much of an issue in tones here. So Yeah, any doubts that I had immediately went out the window, like in the first 2 minutes. And that's a really good sign, especially for a director that you really love, a writer-director you really love. And obviously one of the main things here, like the most important thing, is what Frances McDormand is bringing here. And it's kind of like, your immediate thought is, so basically, we know we're going to have some interesting side characters, and there's going to be the comedic aspect, but also the crime aspect. It might get pretty serious, but then we don't quite know where the laughs are going to come in or how they're going to come in. People will probably die. And so you think, so basically it's like a Coen Brothers universe, and it's like, is McDormand basically just going to be Marge Gunderson on the other side? No. That's not the case at all. Because when we first meet her, for starters, just to kind of show the kind of character that she's going to go into, I was hearing about, Rockwell was talking, I saw an interview with Rockwell where he was talking about how there were two inspirations she seemed to take. I think one was kind of McDonough's thing, but it goes into this performance. And the first thing was, apparently she based her walk and mannerisms on John Wayne. Like, she watched The Searchers and stuff before she started kind of just the way she moves around in the plot of it, in the movie. But there's also the bandana that she wears is apparently a direct reference to Walken in The Deer Hunter, which I literally just talked about last week or a couple weeks ago. And there's even Rockwell's introduction is even him doing the Mao thing in his car, as a note to The Deer Hunter as well. So, because we know McDonough obviously has that history of working with Walken, it just all ties together and makes sense. But not just as like an ode to Walken or whatever, but for her character as well, and to show how ruthless and driven that she's going to be just in these little details alone. And she has that way also where, like, she's incredibly ruthless. Like, when the movie starts and you just see her, if you know the plot, you know that she's a mother who's had her daughter raped and murdered, and then she gets this idea of, I'm going to put the shit on the billboards, try to get the cops' attention. And you, just by that alone, you might think you know what you have here in regards to a mother character that's going to be pushed too far when the cops aren't doing anything about it. But the thing about it is, in another movie, it would be, she would start off as, like, a normal mom, like one of those picture-perfect mothers or whatever, that, like, bakes fucking pies and shit or whatever. And then the events of the movie will eventually get her to the point to where she's reached a breaking point and she's ruthless. But what this movie does is it skips all that, and this is where she starts at the ruthless. It's like, even before this even happened, I think we're supposed to assume she was like this. So it's just, so that just makes it all the more amplified than what it probably was beforehand. And there's even the moment where it's like, and you kind of have this idea engraved in your head that's going to be, well, the cops are going to be, you know, standoffish, they're not going to care, they're probably going to be douchebags or whatever. It basically paints the picture that all the cops are going to be like Rockwell's character is for a lot of the movie. But then she has this meeting with Woody Harrelson, who is the chief that she's calling out on the billboards. And so we figure, when she calls him out by name, and we know the scenario, it's kind of like, okay, we get what it is now. He's like the head or whatever, and he'll be like a main antagonist or something. Once again, your expectations are kind of cut off immediately when, and this isn't like a spoiler or anything, because it's like it's his whole character, if you're not aware of this for some reason, but, when he goes to tell her that he's a bit preoccupied, he's done every possible thing that he can in this case. And the thing is we get it from both perspectives, because he's talking about how, I know that you're pissed off, then it probably looks like we haven't done anything because no arrests have been made and we don't have any leads or we have nothing to go on. But then he explains very reasonably the reason for this is, we've literally done everything. Like, there's really nothing else we can do. There just isn't. Like, finding this person is just so off the grid, it's impossible. We'd have to interrogate everybody in the fucking state, and we just can't do that. There are laws against that. And then on top of that, he says, oh, I'm also kind of preoccupied because I'm trying to be a loving father and husband, and oh yeah, I'm dying of cancer, by the way. And it's like, this is not some bombshell for her. She knows this. And this is how ruthless she is. Like, this is like, oh yeah, well, we all die. We all have our problems. So what if you have cancer? We still haven't arrested anybody. And once again, now it seems like she might be the unreasonable one, but we still get it from her perspective. Because it's like, if you were in her situation, yeah, we would probably do the same thing. We would probably be that ruthless in regards to finding some kind of justice for what happened, regardless of what other people might be going through, because this is the end of our world, more or less, and we're going to try to fix it by doing this, regardless of if the chief, who's done everything he possibly can, is dying of cancer or not. And that's what makes this movie so strong, is how much it... Because there is a very interesting plot here, for sure, but there are so many times where it's like McDonagh decides to kind of let the plot be what it is, and instead focus on the characters and make that the strength of the story. And that's what he does for most of the time. Sometimes it's maybe to a fault, where we go a little too far off into other characters, like, her abusive ex-husband is John Hawkes, and John Hawkes has a 19-year-old girlfriend that's an idiot. And the first time we see her, it's like maybe we linger on her a little too long, and she just kind of has this quirk about her, and how she has to go to the bathroom, but she's stopped what could have been an extreme domestic violence case by doing this. And in that particular moment, they do kind of milk it when we see her again. But this first time, it was kind of like, yeah, that just kind of reminds me of what the Coen brothers do, where there's just that one character that's just here for one scene that you remember just because they thought to put that much effort into this character we'll only see once or twice and is ultimately not that important. And it just kind of enriches the whole atmosphere of the whole thing. But I didn't mind too much that they maybe did that a little. They maybe went a little too far doing that with some characters, but because it really doesn't bring it down at all. And that's also definitely the case with Rockwell's character, where, as I was saying before, it's like we kind of get little bits of how people perceive him before we really get to know him ourselves. Because there's the moment when once he sees the billboards and he drives up to the guy and he says, obviously the fact that it's a black guy is important, because we learn that Rockwell is one of those cops that basically goes after black people just for being black people. And so he meets this guy that's putting up the billboard that just works for the company. And there's like the familiarity, and he looks at Rockwell and he's like, dude, I know you. And he not only does he know him, he calls him by his name. So he really knows him. So Rockwell really did something fucked up. But they don't tell us that. The only way they tell us that is that the dude just spits at him. And then I love that they just kind of leave those things there to where it's like, they don't outright tell you the exact details of what he's done, but it's like, okay, I think I got this guy now. But then they kind of turn that on you a little bit, because much like, say, Rockwell's character, for instance, he sees somebody and just makes an immediate impression and says, well, fuck this person. I'm going to beat the shit out of them just because of their skin color or whatever. So when we see this and we see kind of the way Rockwell is and we learn what he does, it's kind of like, yeah, I think even in multi-layered characters or whatever, it's easy to look at this guy and say, what a piece of shit. It's and you're probably not wrong. But then as the movie goes on, once again, we even take a character like this, and this was something I mentioned in one of the prediction videos, because I just knew. It's one of those things you just know, where it's like, you hear about Rockwell's character, and it's like, yeah, he's the racist cop that beats up black people just because he can, and he's racist, and he likes alcohol. And so you're like, okay, but just knowing that, I guarantee Rockwell can do something really deep with this. And sure enough, and obviously that's to the writing's credit as well, but yeah, I had heard this going in, and it is the absolute truth. He easily has the biggest character arc in the movie. To where it's like, when you see this guy at the beginning, and then you were to jump forward and see this guy at the end, it's astonishing that it's the same character. But when you watch it all the way through and you see that progression, he managed to pull that off. And so I think that's where a lot of the strength is. And I'm glad, like, And this is a great reteaming too, because obviously Rockwell has Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, which I love so much. There's Moon. A lot of people loved him in Conviction. There's Snow Angels. But personally, I think Rockwell's best performance is in Seven Psychopaths. So this was very exciting to me, and I do love that regardless of this whole thing and all this build-up and people saying, you know, Sam Rockwell's an actor that really needs an Oscar nomination at this point. Look at this, and look at that, and look at this. This is... I'm definitely okay that this will be... I think we can pretty much just say that, right? I don't know how much doubt there is, but yeah, I think we can easily say this will be his first nomination, and it's definitely worthy of that. It's definitely not one of those cases of, yeah, let's give that guy who's been in the industry a while with all those great performances a nomination finally just because. This is definitely some of his very best stuff, and as I was just saying, that's a really high-ass bar. So, and that's like a whole portion of the movie in itself, which is great. So, and then as it goes on, we get to see even more sides of characters. Like, it's not, and it's obviously not just Rockwell's character that has this whole thing, but people are just constantly turning our expectations into other ways. Going on what I was just talking about with Frances McDormand and Woody Harrelson having that conversation where it's like, oh, it's not the cop in this case that's the ruthless one, it's her. And it's to the point where she is brutally ruthless, like to where it's almost like the movie risks us turning on her when we hear Harrelson's side of the story. But that never happens to the strength of her performance, obviously. Even those little moments, too, to where it's like every now and then there'll be a moment where she's either alone or somebody's looking away from her and she'll just do like a facial expression or something that really works. But then there's the moment when obviously Harrelson throughout the movie is going to get worse because he says in one of his first scenes, I'm dying of cancer. And there's a moment when they're having a war of words, and this is another case where the tone is really important. And it's like she's saying this thing and he's saying this thing, and we're just watching this war of words going back and forth. And every now and then there's even a comedic line, or just the way somebody delivers it, or how ruthless it is, or whatever. And then suddenly he just coughs blood in her face. And then the tone of the scene just changes entirely right in that moment. And they went from being at this absolute war, and her saying, you know, the fact that nobody's been arrested for my daughter's rape and murder is his fault. You know, this all comes to the head of this horrible, terrible person. And then obviously he's seeing her as this person. But then in this one moment, she gets like, it just, like everything, like that whole war of words we just saw like milliseconds ago is now gone, and they see each other as human beings, and she sees him as somebody that desperately needs help, and you just watch the whole ruthless wall that she's put up around herself to go to war with this guy just drops entirely, and she helps him. And it's, like I said, it's one of those cases where it's like, the fact that this movie could just keep driving that plot and really keep this whole two sides battling thing, but he feels the more important thing is the humanity in the characters, and that's, I can't say it enough, that's where the real strength of the movie is when it says, we got a really great plot working here, but I'm just going to leave that, and we're going to watch as these people do their thing, and show that there's multiple sides to all this stuff, and that it's a lot more complicated than just saying, one's the good guy that's the protagonist that's been pushed too far, and there's an antagonist that's, you know, the big bad police or whatever. And so, and usually those arcs come early, sometimes they come really late, but they're definitely worth kind of waiting for and watching the actors kind of work around and go in those directions gradually. And if there's one weak link in the cast, it is, it was Abby Cornish, I think. It makes sense since she was in Seven Psychopaths. It's Woody Harrelson's wife. She's not good in this. She's actually quite awful. But the thing about that, too, is it's almost like, I don't know if it's just because she's so bad in this or what, but it's also like, not only is her performance not that great, but it's like the dialogue gets worse when she talks too. It's like McDonough actually had like lapses in his dialogue whenever she had to speak. But thankfully she's barely in it, so there is that. And he did get criticism in Seven Psychopaths, where it's like his female characters aren't particularly strong, but obviously he really fights back at that criticism with McDormand's character in this. But you know, there's still the whole yeah, but that's a very very small portion of the movie, and the fact that that's kind of the fact that a couple of her bad scenes are immediately followed by something really grand or really shocking or something that really just pulls you right back in definitely helps a lot too. So it's really hardly detrimental to the full product. And obviously McDonagh's direction here is really great, as it often is, but here in particular it really stands out. I've been talking about the juggling tones and all that, but there's also like some of the shots are really well done. There's yet another one. Once, as I say again, I have been giving a lot of shit to the long take. I feel like the long take is really, really a played out thing, and people just kind of do it to almost for attention now, just to say, oh look, we can do this, so we're automatically good. No, there's a really really good long take in this scene. I'm not sure if it was tampered with in the editing process or not, but it looks very, very seamless and has a lot going on in it. And that's a really great scene. That's probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie, actually. So I'm glad that some great directors can keep the long take alive and keep it away from the, you know, subpar action directors or the subpar indie filmmakers or whatever that are trying to make it this thing that ultimately kills any impact that it has. This is how you do it. So I really love that. And there are moments here and there where it's not quite perfect, like the flashback. Like as soon as I saw, like I haven't read any reviews or really heard anything outside of just the general. There's a lot of praise for this, and obviously the awards attention it's getting. But as soon as I saw this scene, I was like, I'll bet this scene gets a lot of criticism, and I'm gonna be one of those people that does it too. The very heavy-handed flashback when I guess it's supposed to be when she last saw her daughter when she was leaving the house that night. And as they're fighting and she's saying, you can't go out, she says, I can do what I want. It's that whole thing. But then it's the whole, I hope I get raped just to spite you. She's like, yeah, I hope you get raped too. Like, well, that's pretty straightforward. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know that I have a hard time thinking of a way you could have put that, even with that very right in your damn face dialogue, like it's practically coming out of the screen in your face dialogue, how you would do that scene at all without it feeling very heavy-handed. It's like you could have just had a, and she's so good in this, you could totally buy this. You could have literally not cut away from her sitting in the, Frances McDormand sitting in the bedroom and just not saying anything. And it's like, I think a viewer would grasp that she's probably, like, if they mention it once in dialogue that they had a fight the last time she saw her, we could pretty much get from just a scene of Frances McDormand sitting in her daughter's bedroom alone that that's what she's thinking about. So, yeah, that was... But once again, these are small things when you look at the big picture. Very, very small things. And these small things just dwarf in comparison to the great things it's doing. So, and yes, as I was saying, much like his other movies, McDonagh just really has a grasp on just the whole unpredictability thing. Where you watch his movies, and maybe Seven Psychopaths a little less, but certainly In Bruges and this, have you watching them, and especially in a time where, like, cliches are just really thriving, and it's like writers are getting lazier. It's like you just really love scripts like this, or like In Bruges, where you're just like, I honestly just have no idea where this is going to end up. I have no idea where these characters are going to go. I have no idea who's going to live and who's going to die, who's going to make a turnaround, who's going to get worse, and it's... yeah, and it's really, I would like to think, once again, it's only 3 movies to go on, so I don't want to jump the gun too much, but it's like, yeah, when I for some reason had doubts about this, when I heard the plot, and knowing McDonagh's style, I don't think I'm gonna have those doubts the next time he comes up with something. So yeah, there's a lot more to say, but I honestly, in the event that people haven't people don't know too much and haven't got it hasn't gone exactly wide enough for everybody to see it. I don't want to say like got him everything because I totally could. Um, but yeah, and on those side characters too. Another thing is the whole Rockwell and his mom have a nice thing going on, and she's another one of those characters where it's kind of like she's one of those nice, side characters where it's like it just enriches the atmosphere and all that, but it's also like really a driving force to see exactly where Rockwell's character is coming from. And there's yeah, so a lot of really great stuff involving that. Moments like when McDormand goes off on the priest that Lucas Hedges has led into the house. And it's like when you see scenes like that, you wish you had written them. Because it's like you almost get jealous of McDonough while you're watching this movie that he made it. And that is something truly amazing. So yes, I was so happy that this. I guess maybe it was the whole. I was trying not to get too hyped about it, and so yeah, if you can keep yourself from doing that, I think you'll be very very well rewarded. So. Yes. Our second one is going to be Lady Bird. Obviously, Lady Bird has been getting a lot of attention, most recently for the fact that apparently it's the best reviewed movie in Rotten Tomatoes' history. So there's that. Beating out Toy Story 3, I think it was. So, and it's just, a coming of age movie. To my understanding going in, what I was basically hearing was it's like Boyhood for girls at half the length. So there's that. I kind of get that vibe, but also, well, yeah, kind of. It doesn't really feel like Gerwig is trying to do Linklater or anything. Maybe more so in retrospect, but not when you're watching it. But it's set in, well, okay. You want to go back to Boyhood? It's set in 2002. Okay. So maybe there's more Boyhood in here than I remember. It's set in 2002 and then it finds its way into 2003. I guess because that's the period of time that made Gerwig nostalgic, I guess. And before I even go into that, yes, our writer and director is Greta Gerwig, who I have obviously said terrible, horrible things about before. And that's not... it's more so the whole kind of quirky thing. Obviously, everybody that loves this movie, I've noticed, it's a trend, believe it or not. Shock, surprise, they also love Frances Ha. And I think Frances Ha is one of the most excruciating movie experiences of this decade. Certainly one of the most excruciating movie experiences I've had in an actual theater. I saw it in a college town, if that tells you anything. So, in a very packed theater. So, yeah, I wasn't very excited. I mean, I'm really starting to grow very fond of Saoirse Ronan. Obviously, I've liked her since Atonement, of course, and Hannah and stuff like that. And there's stuff like How I Live Now, where the movie is just really not that good at all, but she is a major saving grace for it. And then Brooklyn came around, and now I can officially say that I'm like a really big fan of her after this. So that wasn't what I was worried about, but I was worried about the fact that this movie has fucking Greta Gerwig's name on it as the writer and director. So, and knowing how I feel about her style, I wasn't really sure how I was going to go about this. And it didn't, apparently, like I said, the fan bases are all connecting here, and they all say, well, yes, I love this, and I definitely love Frances Ha, and that's why these really go together. But this didn't really feel like what Baumbach did with that movie. This did kind of feel... It feels... Yeah, you could... Yeah, okay. Even though I just said the opposite at the beginning of this, I'll retract it now and say this. I feel like it's definitely closer to Linklater than it is like Baumbach. So that's probably helps a lot. But you'll notice I keep saying, well, Baumbach and, well, Linklater or whatever. And that's kind of the problem I do want to say in regards to Gerwig, and I don't think This is necessarily just because I went in saying, well, I fucking hate Greta Gerwig, so how's this gonna go? Because she's getting a lot of praise for her direction. A nomination is likely imminent in the category, but watching this, I couldn't help but feel like there wasn't anything unique to the vision, which is weirding me out because I know, I mean, I'm going to get into the good stuff because I do like this movie as a whole, but I want to get this out of the way before I go into what I do like. Um, there's really no particular, and it's not necessarily that a director has to have a signature or anything, but you do feel like when you're with territory that is this explored already, you do want something that kind of feels like it's doing something to at least turn it on its head a little bit, or show it in a way that makes the viewer feel like it's something they haven't seen before, or at least haven't seen this variation of before. And after I saw the movie, I looked up some stuff, and apparently this is what a lot of people claimed that they got. And I don't want to take that away from them or anything, or say they have some other... If anybody has an ulterior motive, it would be me in this case, obviously. So I can't fault them for that, but it's like, I'm a little baffled that there are so many people saying it's doing all the stuff we've seen before, but in such a fresh way, in such a different way. I didn't get that vibe at all. Or it's like, hey, we're doing this cliche, but we're doing it in this smart way. And it's like, well, okay, I guess, but it's not like somebody hasn't done that in a smart way before. And in this way, this smart way certainly doesn't feel unique in itself. So, yeah, so just as far as that, I thought it was lacking. But in regards to everything else, obviously, the whole face of the movie is Saoirse Ronan. Like, if you, like, not... I do like this movie. I do think this is a good movie, and, like, 98% of that is Saoirse Ronan, obviously. Where she's this... The great thing that she does here, as far as the big picture, is she makes a character lovable that really probably shouldn't be. Like, with... Probably... Maybe with another actress... I mean, maybe this could be a credit to Gerwig and her direction. This could have easily fallen apart with the character of Lady Bird being somebody that just comes off as this spoiled, ungrateful brat and all that. Regardless of how... you may not necessarily look at her mother fondly either, and there's just a whole bunch of dysfunction here, but... the way she, like, you know, turns her back on Beanie Feldstein, or, like I said, she doesn't seem to... There's always something else she seems to want from her parents when it seems like they're doing everything they possibly can. Poor Tracy Letts, I, like, felt for him through the whole movie. he was almost just as much a standout to me as Laurie Metcalf was, weirdly enough. But you don't really... And I love that he's, like, in so many movies now. Like, every corner you go around now in a movie that has a relatively small budget has fucking Tracy Letts in it, and I love it. So, yes, but anyway, Ronan is really able to bring the qualities of this character, whether it be like her delivery or the way she kind of carries herself in the scene. It all adds up to... You can acknowledge it's like, well, I don't know that I would like this person if I knew her personally. But that's usually the whole appeal of these kind of movies, especially if we're talking Linklater movies, where it's like you see the people in those movies and you're like, these are totally people that I would know, and these are people I would love hanging out with, like, all the time. She's not really one of these people. So it's very tricky what she has to do in order to make the audience go to her in the way they do, and gravitate towards her the way they do, and it does work. And there's, like, stuff when she's, like, first going after Lucas Hedges. And she does the thing where she's kind of trying to... She's obviously in that phase in her life, you know, the whole teenagerhood, where she's trying to kind of... I don't know if it's find her identity or create one or whatever it is, but she's obviously going to try a bunch of different things out. So she goes up, and it's almost like she's kind of trying to do the bad girl thing, where he says... so do you live in this neighborhood? And she's like, no, I'm from the wrong side of the tracks. But then Lucas Hedges is like, amazed to learn later that there's literal train tracks she's talking about. um, and then there's some great deliveries, like when she goes to Timothée Chalamet, and she's trying to be, just jokey or smooth or whatever, and it's the she's just kind of graffitied the nun's car or whatever, and then when Chalamet finds out about it, she says, hey, you won't snitch on me, will you? Because if you do, I'm gonna fucking kill your family. And then it's like she catches herself going too far. And once again, these are things that could just absolutely fall flat, and they have for Gerwig in the past before. Maybe it helps that she's not acting. It might. Because it's all about the delivery, this kind of dialogue, and all the actors make it work. Chalamet has a really nice retort to that as well, and there's also some, obviously, the heart of the movie is the relationship between her and her mother, with Laurie Metcalf just getting. She got like 4 critics wins in one day yesterday, and I imagine she's going to keep it up, and which is great because I've been such a huge fan of hers since I grew up on Roseanne, and I still watch Roseanne all the time, and it's like, Dan, John Goodman, was always my favorite character on that show, but second, right underneath him, was Jackie, because I loved Laurie Metcalf so much, and she really does bring something to this that is like. It really comes through in the scenes when they we see their relationship in very, I wouldn't say abstract, but it's somewhere in that vicinity, where we can just very seamlessly go back and forth in the same scene. Like the moment when they're looking for dresses, and they're fighting, and as they often do, and it's building and building, and the fight's getting worse and worse. And then finally, she just says, oh my god, you are so infuriating. And then right after that just flows right into her finding a dress, and the two of them start gushing over the dress. And they have that, now they have that, and the fight is gone. So stuff like that really shows that kind of real relationship that you have with the people that you... Obviously, we're all going to have the... That's kind of a way, I guess, that you can look at Lady Bird in a relatable way, to where it's the whole... They go into this whole thing, too, about the whole... You can I seriously just heard this line recently, and I can't remember where it came from. The whole... I think it was in a Christmas movie, too. Where you... is it Home Alone? It's something where they say, yes! It is the old guy in Home Alone that says... You can love your family, but sometimes you can get so heated you can forget that you love them. There's a lot of that in this movie, especially between these two, and that's really brought to life by the two of them. And obviously, Metcalf's performance is one of those ones where some of her best moments are when she's not saying anything. I imagine the scene that's getting the most attention is the airport, which I guess I can say without saying too much. And so, but yeah, in the meantime, that's actually a much smaller portion of the movie than I thought it was going to be. I had assumed that it was going to be, especially at the beginning when it's them in the car, that, to be fair, that was an unexpected turn, that scene, but, yeah, it's, definitely the coming of age thing, and that's the heart of it, but it also feels like it's on the side, too. And a lot of it is her, going through all these different identities and doing the whole... Like, when she's friends with Beanie Feldstein, she's the outcast, but then when she falls in with the popular girl, then she tries to be one of them, and she can get the emo, broody band guy with Timothée Chalamet, or the theater guy with Lucas Hedges, or whatever. And I do like the way they go into the whole... Occasionally, there is a moment that really catches you off guard in a way that you were not expecting. I don't think there's that many, but there are some. One of the things is the reveal about Lucas Hedges. And it's not so much what the reveal is, that we've seen that before, but it's the way it's handled here, to where it's this really, really big reveal that's going to completely take the story in an entirely different direction than we've been heading for like the first half hour, and this big giant reveal that's going to completely turn the story in another direction is a blink and you'll miss it moment. Like, it's there, and it's like, if you turn away for like 1 second, you're not going to know what the fuck happened. You're not going to know what she saw. And I thought that was an interesting way to kind of do that without it being like having a super dramatic moment, but having like no dramatic way about showing it, which sounds conflicting, but it does work. To Gerwig's credit, my least favorite words to say together. um, and so it does, and every now and then there is like there's another cast member I really liked is Stephen Henderson from Fences as the acting coach as well, which has some nice scenes in it. It reminded me of the acting scenes in that indie movie Little Men from a couple years ago, which are like the best scenes in that movie. But going on, there is a Gerwigness about it. There is one particular moment where I was like, oh my fuck, that was right out of Frances Ha in the worst way possible. And it was the moment when Gerwig has this way. I think Gerwig thinks that she has mastered the one-liner. And once again, I know people really take to that. I know she's got a lot of fans that love this shit, but I think that's one of her worst qualities. And a particular moment in this movie is when it's a scene where she and Beanie Feldstein are at school and they're just talking. But the thing is that the scene starts in mid-conversation, just in time for Saoirse Ronan to say one sentence before it goes in the direction the scene is going to go. And she says, hey, did you know it's normal to not touch your penis? And I think the fact that, we catch it in mid-conversation, but it's like, the scene starts with that one sentence, and then it has nothing to do with anything. And it's that humor that's supposed to be like, oh, well, that was so random, hilarious, or whatever. But it's just like, oh my god, that so much reeked of Gerwig. I wanted to pull my hair out. But once again, it's like, and the whole point of it is that we just ignore it and go into the next thing. So it's like, hey, I got an idea. If you want us to ignore something, just don't fucking put it in there, please. But, okay, it was a cheap laugh for a lot of people, I guess. But anyway, it's fine. The whole movie is fine. So yeah, but the main problem here is I'm not quite getting once again, I hate to, judge a movie based on the reception it has gotten. And opinions should come from just the individual person, but it's like, I am honestly quite baffled about this praise about being fresh and unique. I don't get it at all. It's very, another movie it really reminded me a lot of was The Dangerous Lives of Altar Boys. I feel like there's kind of a lot of that in here, just with the gender switch, so yeah. If you've seen that, maybe you'll know what I mean when I get those vibes. I do think it has a problem going on too long as well. Like, there is, like I said, it's only an hour and a half, but it does feel like it's really stretching there at the end. I do think some people probably would have been unsatisfied, and there is like maybe one more piece of ground to cover there or whatever, but honestly, I wouldn't have been mad if it ended at the airport. So, I don't know how people feel about that, but it would have been a kind of a downer, but, I feel like with what Metcalf brought to that scene, kind of tells us where it was going to go. And we didn't really need any particular follow-up, let alone how long of a follow-up we got. And so pretty much everything after the airport scene kind of lessens the impact of what that scene brought and how it could have, I feel like it could have closed there, honestly. But yeah, so the point here is that Ronan really does make this movie. Gerwig does make some interesting choices, and overall does have a decent hold on the idea and this whole setup. But as opposed to saying it's, breaking barriers for coming-of-age movies, it's doing things in its own way, I'm just chalking it up to another coming-of-age movie, and that's what it is to me, but it is a very good one, and it is made, if there's anything unique about it, it's the performances, for sure, and the cast itself. But yeah, so, And that definitely makes up for where Gerwig's handling of it. Like I said, it's not even so much that there is a lack of handling of it. It's the fact that it doesn't stand out in a way. And when you're doing, once again, going back to the beginning, such, used territory, you've got to have your own voice, and that didn't really seem to come through here, except with occasional moments. But most of it was in the writing when it did come through. So, yeah, I guess we'll see what else she does as a director. But in the meantime, yeah, we have this, and she's obviously going to be fine. The movie's going to do very fine come award season and the day of the Oscar nominations. So, good for all of them, especially Ronan. All right, our third movie is going to be Wonder. I think everybody was surprised by this, except for the people that would already see movies like this and already regularly see movies like this. I remember when it came out with Justice League, and when I went and saw Justice League, the lobby was pretty busy. It was about 4 o'clock, and it's like most of the people in the lobby were going to Wonder and not Justice League. And then obviously the reception started to get really good, and apparently it was one of those cases where it was kind of advertised as this, I guess, almost Hallmark-like movie. But people ended up liking it. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, so it's still cheesy, it's still cliche and all that, but it's like, oh, it's just enough to win you over. But no, that's not really the case. This movie, I just talked about criticizing this with Gerwig, but this movie pulls it off much more. Taking explored territory and doing something that makes it feel different. That's exactly what this movie does. To where, I assume it's long since played out, but I know I was one of those people making jokes about it was like, oh, so Jacob Tremblay's playing Rocky Dennis. Okay, that's what this movie is. The end. And when it starts, you know what, honestly, when it starts, you know what else it feels like? It feels like Jack, the Robin Williams movie. And it's even when the principal greets him, in this movie it's Mandy Patinkin, and it's like it really feels like the exact same setup, where he's been sheltered, and it's like his parents are really protective of him, and then he's put in public school and he's made fun of, and the adults try to kind of help him build that, and ultimately he gets it's fucking Jack is what it is. It's with a little bit of mask thrown in, and I don't know how that's going to affect your opinion. But it's no, there are plenty of differences, I promise. Starting with the fact that it kind of immediately kind of nips the cliche in the bud a little bit with the way it approaches when he's first shown around the school. Because obviously you see the image of him with the astronaut helmet on, hide his face and all that, and you think, well, this just has quirky, trying to be indie-looking movie all over it. But yeah, he eventually gets it off, and then he starts to these kids give him a tour before his first day, and it's like immediately they feel like real kids. Like they'll hesitate, or they might flinch at first, but then they try to be nice to him, because it's like, believe it or not, most kids might actually be that way. It's not like he's just going to go to school and be ruthlessly bullied by the entire class, every single kid at that school. Yeah, there are going to be kids that try to be nice to him, and it's going to be most of them. And the thing of it turns out the world might not be set on fire by today's youth. Go figure. So that immediately started, but then the characters actually get more complex as it goes, because it does something really interesting. Where it starts off, and you know it's going to go in this direction immediately, because when it starts, it shows his name, Augie, written out, like it's going to be a chapter. Which is really, because you imagine the whole movie's going to follow him, but then when you see that, you're like, oh, are there going to be cases where we're not following Augie? Because that'll be weird. Then what are we going to focus on? So it kind of goes, you kind of forget that happened, that it's going to be in chapters. So it kind of goes, and he goes through his first day of school, and even though there are some kids that are nice to him, enough goes wrong for it to be bad. At least the first go around. And then the next chapter comes around, and you think, okay, so, but the thing here is that once you see the chapters, you think, okay, I think I see where this is going to go. We're going to see it from his perspective. Then probably we got our other stars here. Obviously, are Julia Roberts and Owen Wilson. So it's like, okay, so we're going to get the whole Julia Roberts angle, then we're going to get the Owen Wilson angle, right? No, no, it never comes to that. It's his sister, and then it's his sister's friend, and then it's the kid that was his friend, and then kind of bullied him, and then became his friend again. And it takes you in these different directions you're not expecting at all, because you're following characters that seem like they're like way in the background, or they're characters that are just going to be cliche through the whole thing and are just here to kind of like fill in what would be gaps in the background or something. But no, all these characters have like a whole different perspective going on here. And it's like they keep building up this character that's the sister's friend, and it's like, oh yeah, she was my best friend, but then she went away to camp, and then when she came back, she like totally wouldn't talk to me. It was weird. And then it's like that friend has a whole fucking backstory for why that's the case. And it all kind of ties into her. She's like a family friend, so she's like kind of Augie's friend too. So there's all kind of a tie-in here to this. And then it's the case of like the kid where he's basically pressured into bullying him. It's one of those cases where he's eavesdropped on when he doesn't realize people can hear him, or Augie specifically can hear him. So, and then it's like the whole "so why you mad" thing, and it's like, well, you think, oh well, that kid's a dick, so it's like he's gonna be nice to him, he's gonna be his friend, he legitimately does like him, but then when he's around other kids, it's like, oh yeah, he's a freaking weirdo or something, and it hurts Augie's feelings. But then we get the whole backstory on this kid, and we see it just all makes sense. Like nobody is like some cutout, caricature here. And it really brings the story to life and kind of shows, it kind of brings the whole theme together, because it's like the whole idea is, oh, Augie's flawed on the outside, but if you get to know him, he's actually wonderful and all that. And it's like, that's every character in the movie. Where it's like, the sister maybe seemed like attention-starved, or it's like, she's the whole, oh, everybody's paying attention to Augie, nobody cares about me character. But then we see, and she's kind of flawed on the outside, but then when we go in, and the same thing with the kid, folding under peer pressure, or her friend kind of changing friend groups on her, and it's like all these people seem like dicks on the cover, but then when we go in all those different directions, because we know enough from the other stories where the parents are coming from, they don't really need other angles. And they play the characters so well also that we're given just enough about them to where it's not necessary to go into them. So these other characters that are outside of the house really bring the story together and make it feel like it's this really kind of widespread thing that's all coming together and kind of really fits the tone of the whole, hey, we're all just people that want to be liked. So yeah, regardless of what we look like or what friend group we hang out in and all that stuff. And that's so not what you're expecting when you see this movie. You expect it to be, oh no, the ugly kid's actually really got a good heart on the inside, the end. But they want to do that in so many different ways with so many different characters that he just happens to be the center of. And that's really great. Well, that's definitely the way to take territory we've definitely seen before and do something different with it and make it seem like, once again, like I was just talking about, I never thought I would have compared Wonder and 3 Billboards before I saw them, but yeah, it's like we got a central story here, but it's really about how the directions these characters individually go and how they kind of reflect on each other and all that. And it all does really work well, and it's all brought together by all those really good performances, particularly from the young cast. Another one of those cases where you really could have tripped up, but they found just the right people. The best friend was the kid in Suburbicon, who I thought was quite good in that. So, yeah. And we do have stuff like the quirky teacher and all that. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely cliches in it. And like towards the end too, it does start to feel like it did kind of feel like it's like we've got so much of this unique stuff here and the way we're telling the story, but it's like, but we don't know how to end it. Maybe we should just kind of, we can just ease a cliche in there and then we can end. So we've done enough good up to this point. We can get away with a cliche or two. And so, and that's the thing too, is it's not just Augie that is, it's not just his face that's his flaw. It's, in movies like this, it would be very typical that the kid is like, he's got a heart of gold on the inside, even though he might not live up to that on the outside. But it's like, he's not really a fucking saint either. Like, he's still a kid. Like, yeah, he's the outcast when he's at school, but when he's at home, he he could be any kid when he's at home. And obviously, kids can just be dicks sometimes, and Augie is no exception to that just because he's deformed. He's still a kid regardless, and I like the fact that the movie really sticks to that. It's worth noting the director and co-writer on this is Stephen Chbosky, who did The Perks of Being a Wallflower, so we should have known. We really should have known this was going to have quality to it. Once again, I should really not doubt the directors that I take a liking to, regardless of their small filmographies. So yes, and then there's some things in here to where it's kind of like it's also kind of like you're not 100% sure if it works or not, but in the moment, sure. All the Star Wars references are interesting, and conveniently timed. There is there's the whole thing that's related that you can see him relating it to himself, like Chewie. He kind of sees himself in Chewie a little bit because he doesn't look like everybody else. But then there's stuff like the way he's bullied, because they get the idea that he says he loves Star Wars when he introduces himself, and then he's got the fucking Obi-Wan braid. But the thing about it is, the thing that really strikes me is this movie really tackles the idea of like when they find out he loves Star Wars, the kid bullies him by calling him, Darth Sidious. Well, the kid calls him Barf Hideous. And then later on, he also makes a Gollum reference. And so it's like, it's interesting that this movie depicts that world we live in now, to where it's like, liking Star Wars or Lord of the Rings made you like a nerd and an outcast, and people would poke fun at you for it. But it's like, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings are so popular now that bullies having knowledge of it can use it as fuel to bully you. It's like, because he knows who Darth Sidious is, he can come up with Barf Hideous. Or because he knows who Gollum is, he can do the whole making fun of him for being ugly thing. So that's interesting. So it's like so they're kind of, they're up to date on how bullies would act, I suppose. It's kind of like, which one was it? I think it was The Boy Next Door, the Jennifer Lopez movie, when the bully walked up to the kid, because the kid had a problem. I can't believe I'm talking about this movie 3 years later, and I somehow still remember this exact particular detail. The kid was an outcast and bullied because I guess he had like a natural pissing himself. So this bully, who's like 10, runs up to him and says, "Hey, guess what was on Turner Classic Movies last night? The Wiz." Okay, I get it maybe if he said The Wiz, but this 10-year-old bully said, "Hey, guess what was on Turner Classic Movies last night?" So you're not going to find those bullies in this. These bullies actually still seem like real people. And like I said, this movie actually has, the heart to explore that and see where these people come from. And so, yes, it's very well done, if still kind of your cliche feel-good movie, done in a really nice way. So, yes. Our last movie is going to be Stronger. This is the other Boston bombing movie. David Gordon Green's Boston bombing movie with Jake Gyllenhaal, where I think this and Patriots Day were announced around the same time, but obviously Patriots Day came out like a year earlier, or about half a year earlier. I guess this one was kind of pushed to kind of avoid being around the same time as that. So, and they're not comparable. I mean, clearly when you see Peter Berg made a Boston bombing movie and David Gordon Green made a Boston bombing movie, it's like, you just know those are not going to be the same movie. So it's not, because it's like when United 93 and World Trade Center came out close together, and everybody was like, "Oh, everybody's doing that," but it's like they're different movies. They're very, you can say that about World Trade Center and United 93 as well. Very, very different movies, and they take different perspectives. The entirety of Patriots, the entire events depicted in Patriots Day, have come and gone by the first half hour of this movie, and it's all after that. So if that's for some reason something you were worried about, no, that's not what this is. But I'd like to think if you just look at them, you can tell they're different movies. And I was very interested in how I was going to take this because if you were not aware and you haven't been following along, Patriots Day was my favorite movie of last year. So, but once again, I'm not saying Stronger had anything to live up to because of that, because not even going to be close to the same movie at all. Totally different outlook. So the idea here, obviously, is Jake Gyllenhaal plays the dude that lost his legs, and we see how he lives with that. And once again, it's one of those cases where you're like, oh, well, I know it's a Boston Bomb movie, but at the same time, in regards to what the content of the movie is, I feel like I've seen this a few times at least. But the thing, obviously, there's the other layer of real dude, real events, different feel, I guess. But even then, it's kind of like you gotta wonder what. But David Gordon Green's kind of director that really, we're not talking like Pineapple Express or Your Highness or The Sitter or something. We're talking like the guy that made Joe and George Washington and Snow Angels, stuff like that. And so so you kind of feel like this won't necessarily be Hollywoodized, because you always have to have that problem. It's like, how much are they going to really play it up and dramatize it? But when you see David Gordon Green's name and that it's going to be him kind of doing his, laying low territory and not necessarily the bigger stuff, you think, okay, there is probably going to be some humanity in this. And David Gordon Green seems like the kind of director that would want to tell you straight up exactly what it was without kind of trying to dramatize it too much. I feel like he kind of got lost in the middle somewhere, though, when you look at this. It's worth noting that, obviously, Gyllenhaal has been taking on a lot of challenging roles for quite a while now. And he's one of those actors to where if he was played by somebody else, you would think, well, this is Oscar bait if ever there was Oscar bait. But, Gyllenhaal has proven up to this point that he seems like he loves the challenge of the roles he takes on so much that that's not what this was for him. That's never what it is for him. So that kind of, the casting of Gyllenhaal takes it away from just kind of coming off as an Oscar bait movie, which it very well could have if it wasn't him. And it felt like an actor that was just really, really damn thirsty for awards. I know that's like a real surface level way to look at it, but I mean, sometimes the movies don't succeed in taking your mind elsewhere. And yes, he is definitely up for the challenge here, but the real star of this movie is Tatiana Maslany from, Orphan Black, where she is, I almost feel like she's the leading role in this movie, quite honestly. Gyllenhaal's performance is great, but a lot of that has to do with the physicality of it. Which is not to take away from it at all. Like, you could say, like, I think that's where a lot of the praise for DiCaprio and The Revenant comes from, is just, and, like, how I feel like his Oscar win is founded, and it's not just necessarily the, oh, well, because it was DiCaprio and he hadn't gotten one yet. There's definitely, physicality is something that's definitely not looked at enough when you look at a performance in its entirety. It's always like, oh, they did the crying thing, they did the shouting thing, which Gyllenhaal gets to do plenty of crying and plenty of shouting, I promise you. But playing drunk, all the stuff, it's all in here. All those, actors that get awards tropes, they're all in here. But, and like I said, even though Gyllenhaal as an actor does feel like he takes it beyond that in regards to how seriously he takes the role, I feel like Tatiana Maslany really walked away with this movie by far. And she's, weirdly enough, and I don't know how heartless this will sound, especially since we're talking about a real dude, and this is an event that's very, very current in regards to history. It was only, 4 years ago, I think. So the whole idea is that this is a dude, okay? Just a dude living his life, according to the movie, trying to get his ex-girlfriend back, who was running in the marathon. And obviously the bomb went off, horrible things happen. This dude lost his legs, has to live with that. His life is terrible now. Like, this is an unexpected turn. Nobody deserved this, and it has happened to him just because that's where fate landed, and it sucks. And so it's like this guy's gonna struggle. This guy's gonna have a really bad time, and so we feel for him. And there are certainly moments in there like there's a really nice moment when they try to take away from the gore of it and the horror of it. Not to the point to say, oh, that no, they show you. Oh my good God, do they show you? But they wait. They wait it out, and they kind of progressively get you to that point because they don't want to be all up in your face with the gore. Which obviously is not the way. Obviously, Peter Berg showed us all like front and center, but he handled it in a way. Like, I don't want to do too much of a comparison because when I say this movie did well, it might sound like I'm saying that means Patriots Day didn't, which is not the case at all. Like, the way they handle, like the way Berg shows the gore up front and center works in that movie wouldn't have worked here. So there's no comparison. So what happens here is we have this scene where Gyllenhaal's getting his bandages taken off, and it's in the background and kind of out of focus because our focus here is Gyllenhaal and Maslany here. And it feels we feel their connection very strongly because of this. And it seems like that's where they kind of shy away from that a little bit, because obviously because we're going to see it later, but because it would also take away from what the importance of this scene is, which is this. And that's good. And then there's the moments like when we really deal with the humiliation he has to go through, whether he has to, like when he has to bathe himself or when he has to use the bathroom. These will not be pleasant experiences for him, and they will not be... Yeah, but just the humiliation factor is off the charts. So, it's weird to me. That's the only way I can put it. It is weird to me, and maybe it's my problem. I don't know. Like, maybe there's some kind of heartless thing about me or something, but I don't know. The way this movie portrays him, which may very well be directly, it's amazing to me we could see this guy go through all this horrible stuff that he doesn't deserve, yet by about an hour and 20 minutes to half an hour into the movie, which is pretty late, an hour 20 to an hour 30, out of an hour and 55 minute or so minute movie, that the progression to him becoming unsympathetic happens a little too fast. And like you would think, given his scenario, there would never be a case where he's unsympathetic. For somebody that, you know, has that empathy to say, he's being a dick right now, he's being a douchebag drunk right now, but it's like, I mean, look what the dude's been through. I can't hate him. But I don't know. This movie took me to a place to where it was like, after a while I stopped feeling for him. Because he just took it that far. And that's another case where I feel like Tatiana Maslany really comes through with this. Is her character is so strong, and she plays her so well and makes her character so sympathetic for how she's dealing with this, that when he treats her like shit, it turns us against him. And it's like, this movie should be doing anything but turning us against him. I like how much they're giving her character, but it's like, I feel like the focus should really be being sympathetic towards this guy, and this movie makes that really hard. I have no idea if that's the intention or not. I would really think not. But it does... They do manage to pick him back up. We do get to that point. The scene at the end of the stadium really does bring him back. And we do bring it back to... we get a nice close to the point where it's all fine and good, but there is a portion of this movie where I feel like he loses us as a main character. And that is... I don't necessarily think... It wouldn't be the fault of Gyllenhaal. It might be Green's direction, given the way the character's portrayed, maybe how he's written. It's kind of difficult to say, but... all I know is that really should not be what's happening in this movie, is for us to kind of try to deter away from him. This is also a moment when you have all this dark stuff going on. I'm not necessarily saying you have to like just bask in that constantly, given the nature of it, but it's like, this movie does also make attempts at humor. Once again, this is the guy that directed Pineapple Express. He knows humor regardless of how dark and depressing some of his movies, like George Washington and Snow Angels, have been. But all the attempts at humor in this seemed like really ill-timed. The moment when he's like driving drunk and he's like all over the place, and it's like he could be. I mean, I know it's late, the streets are empty and everything, but still, there could be somebody out there that is in danger. How about the people in the car, for instance? And the cops pull him over, and they recognize him, and the cops say, "Hey, dude, can I get your autograph?" While they're pulling him over for drunk driving. And that's a moment that just feels like it's not even in this movie. That is that is so in any other movie, most likely a comedy, not in this movie. Maybe that's something that happened. That actually sounds like one of those things that's so outlandish it probably did happen. But it doesn't fit the tone of this movie. It's like what Mel Gibson did with Hacksaw Ridge. It's like if it feels too unbelievable, even if it's true, if you're making a movie, you probably should decide what's going to work and what isn't. In regards to making an audience feel like this is a real person in real life. Because truth being stranger than fiction can hurt a movie. So the thing here is, and we have these moments like when he falls out of bed. And you think, oh, this is a dramatic moment. This is the first time he's tried to get out of bed since he's been home, and he's like on the floor and he's in pain. He's busted his nose on the floor, and he's groaning. And the punchline of the scene is his mom's outside the door and thinks he's beating off. So it's like, how in God's name does that humor fit into this? This is not meshing well at all. And then there's scenes where I don't even know if it's supposed to be humor or what it is. It's when Tatiana Maslany stays over and they sleep together, and the next morning she goes out in his jersey and gets in the refrigerator, and she's on her way back to the room, and his mom like stands up to her, and she's like, "Did you have sex with my son?" And then that's the end of the scene. It's like, what's the? I don't know. It's weird. So yeah, it's I don't know. It doesn't really. But then there is every now and then there's a comedic scene that kind of works. Like the start of the scene of him getting drunk, like when they're on the swing. That's kind of funny. But for the most part, there seems like a whole lot of miscalculation in this movie, regardless of where its heart really is. And once again, there are definitely scenes where that comes out, the real heart of it, especially in those closing scenes. But like, there's a lot of scenes that there are some scenes that are strong, like in the first half hour or so when they're one of the bombers is killed and the other gets caught, obviously. And we're listening to them watch, and like they're bloodthirsty. Like when they hear one of them was killed, like they celebrate. But we get the mindset that they're in that moment because everything has just happened. But then we go on, and the family continues to be this thing, and we know, obviously, there's always talk about how accurate Boston families are portrayed in movies, how they're loud. Their accents can almost be incomprehensible sometimes. A lot of profanity, but then at the same time, it's like, even though it's real, there are only so many times where you can really garner, like, humor and relatability out of the loud Boston family stereotype. The one I always think of first, obviously, is Mickey's family in The Fighter, clearly. And it's like, and it is impressive you've got, like, Miranda Richardson. The really unexpected people playing the loud Boston family. Clancy Brown is in this, who I love. And it just kind of feels, it's really, they kind of beat you down with it. And it becomes very tired. And the thing is that it's not so much that they are the loud Boston family stereotype. It's that they don't go beyond it. Which is what a lot of that is. Like, a lot of the times when you have the loud Boston family, it's a punchline. And yeah, and it's like, this of all movies, you would think they would take it to other levels. There's even moments in The Fighter pull that off, but here, I don't know. So yeah, so it's, like I said, it does have a lot of, like, Oscar cliches in it and stuff like that, but there are some strong moments, like Tatiana Maslany's performance for sure. Gyllenhaal's commitment is always praised. And like I said, there are definitely some nice moments in there that really bring forth the uniting feel. But yeah, that's I'll take the last 10 minutes of Patriots Day, so we can come back to comparing now. So yeah, that's what these are. Next week, I already have my ticket for Star Wars, so that's definitely happening. I'm also going to see Coco in a couple of days, I think, finally. So Star Wars and Coco will be on a video together. Hail Disney, I guess. Uh, and I think I think I'm probably gonna end up seeing The Star as well. I don't know. I guess because it got a Golden Globe nomination or something. But yeah, and then yeah, I will attempt to get those verses out there. I know I'm really falling behind, but those verses will come as well. So yeah, so until all that fun stuff, we're done.